Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Lieutenant Stephen Rogers here at Campaign for America with John McCann. We welcome you this evening to Campaign for America, and we're just thankful that all of you from coast to coast and around the world are able to join us this evening. Folks, we're on tonight because we were tied up last night. We weren't able to come on, and just a programming note, we will also return Monday night instead of Wednesday night next week. We're going to be traveling across the country, campaigning for America, and also doing some other things to advance our America First agenda. We got a lot to talk about tonight, folks. As you know, that there has been congressional hearings where Secretary Austin, Blinken, and General Mike Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, were testifying before a congressional committee. And I've got to tell you, folks, in my view, based on my experience, I was rather shocked, dismayed, and disturbed over the responses of these military and civilian leaders of our government. I'm just bewildered, John. I'm bewildered over the fact that these three individuals sat there and, in my view, if not outright lied to the American people, certainly did not want to answer what I would say is the truth regarding some of the questions they were answered, especially, and let's take it from here, John, especially who, what, when, and where was the advice to keep American troops in Afghanistan given? It seems to me we never got that answer.
No, we didn't, Steve. And, you know, I always like the eyeball test, and I will repeat this and I have repeated this in our prior broadcast. I'm going to repeat it again. To any of those three guys exuded trust and confidence when you watched them on television. I don't care what your politics are. I don't care if you're left wing, right wing, chicken wing. When you watch those three people through the prism of these are the people supposedly protecting America, as a citizen, do you feel secure tonight or less secure after you watch those three testify? I've never seen anything like it. And to have three people so unimpressive in such tremendous positions of importance is probably more dangerous to the country than Joe Biden himself.
You know, you bring up a good point. Our adversaries, our foreign adversaries were watching this, ladies and gentlemen. Our NATO allies were watching this. And it's just astonishing to me, especially General Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Folks, by the way, we do have a petition, an online petition, asking for his court-martial removal or firing or resignation from that office. It's been out there a couple of weeks. Today, we just went over the 2,000th signature. We're looking for 10,000 signatures on that petition. You can certainly email us or just scroll down on, if you're on Facebook, on our Facebook page, you'll find the link. If not, email us, and you can see right here on the red band. See that little red banner down here under our pictures, campaignforamerica.com. Go to our website. Just click on Contact Us and give us your email. We don't need anything else but your email, and we'll get you the link. But here's the point, folks. As John brought up, our national security is now in grave danger. We got three top people, four, all right, including Joe Biden, who outright lied to the American people, who covered up things like this. There were questions with regard to 2,500 American troops. Remember that number. Milley, Austin, and Blinken said that they suggested that 2,500 American troops stay in Afghanistan, that you couldn't pull out the way Biden wanted to. Now, this was their suggestion. This was their opinion, according to Milley, right, John? And when Milley was asked, did you give this recommendation to President Joe Biden? His answer, John, was, I don't talk about the recommendations I give the president. John, you're a lawyer. What does that say to you?
Well, you don't have to be a lawyer, because if you watch the rest of the clip, his next sentence is, but I recommended 2,500 people, 2,500 troops. So he, on one hand, he says, well, I'm not going to disclose personal conversations, and then he discloses it. So, I mean, you don't have to be a lawyer to watch that. And again, do these people give you any kind of confidence in what they're doing? I mean, the fact remains this: General Milley admitted under oath, Steve, as well, is that he's talking to the press regularly, as he views as part of his job description, Well, there's been a search of his job description right after he said that all over it's not to be found. It's also been put forth that it's good for generals to speak to each other, to speak to their adversaries, to keep things quiet. And as a general concept, sure, that's correct. But the problem is General Milley is not in the chain of command. He's not in the chain of command. He's an advisor to the president. That's it. And it's striking that he admits these things. And fascinating, he throws the president under the bus and basically says, "No, I'm not going to disclose it," as I said, but he does. And it was it was backed up by the testimony of the other individuals. And you don't see Joe Biden upset at this at all, at least publicly. We don't know what's going on behind the scenes. We never will. But think of that for a second. I mean, isn't that what Donald Trump basically accused Milley of, throwing him under the bus? I mean, this guy is out for himself, it appears, in my opinion. And certainly you can't have a guy like that advising a president of the United States. Get him out of that job. He should probably do himself a favor and get out of there before he gets into serious, serious trouble.
Well, John, you bring up a good point. He wasn't in a chain of command, which leads us to the infamous phone call to the Chinese Communist Party. Now, folks, I'm very familiar. I was an officer, a military officer in the United States Navy. I'm very familiar with the chain of command, very familiar with the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and I'll speak to that in a moment. But with regard to the phone call, yes, and I said this on news media outlets all week. Yep, there are back channels. There are discussions with counterparts. It's done all the time. But what is not done all the time is for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman, to tell our arch enemy, the Chinese Communist Party, that I'm going to make a phone call to you if we're going to attack. My goodness, folks. John, my frightening thought was, what if we were in a real world situation where we believed the Chinese were going to attack and we were going to launch first? This guy was going to pick up the phone, folks, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and call them and tell them we're not going to attack. I mean, what I'm trying to say, folks, is accidents happen because of stupidity like that. Now, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, what he did was try to take control of the policies of this country. And John, I got to tell you, when I saw him there, I saw his face, I studied him, it was kind of frightening. I believe that this guy actually believed he was going to take control of the entire military establishment of our country. It reminds me of, remember, John, his name escapes me, when Reagan was shot, there was a general who got behind the microphone and said, "I'm in charge." Who was that, John? I forget his name.
Alexander Haig.
Alexander Haig. Folks, Alexander Haig, he was working at the White House.
He was the chief of staff at the time.
Chief of staff at the time, exactly. And President Reagan got shot. George Bush was up in the air somewhere, flying from or to or from Texas. So a reporter asked the question, well, who's in charge? Alexander Haig said, "I'm in charge." John, a military guy. Now, he wasn't in the military then, but he did say he was in charge. And he wasn't in that chain of command, right? It would be the Speaker of the House if something happened to the president and vice president. So, John, to your point, is it possible? And I'm not saying I have any basis other than being concerned about how our government was very vulnerable at that time. Is it possible that Milley took it upon himself to be in charge?
Excuse me, Steve. I'm going to give Milley the benefit of the doubt and say he argued in his testimony that it was out of context. The context was he was suggesting that he was just saying that to calm the situation down. He didn't really mean it, is what he said in his testimony. Now I got to ask you, let's assume that that's true. How is that any better? How is that any better? I mean, the fact of the matter is, you bring out an excellent point. Wars have started over less mistakes than that. The idea that he in his personality, his cult of personality, I'm the one. I believe the Chinese government knows that he's not in the chain of command. I have a good idea that the Chinese have been briefed on that issue. So outside of maybe laughing at him behind the scenes potentially because he was trying to project power he doesn't have, it could have been taken the wrong way just as easily and started a war.
Well, let's look at something else, John, that happened here.
It could have looked.
First of all, John, he should have notified Secretary of Defense Esper. That's his supervisor, the civilian in control. But here's another element to this that's really troubling. When he went to the combatant commanders, and when he went to the others, commanders in the military, and told them if anybody is going to think about a military strike anywhere on this planet, in essence, this is what he was saying, nothing happens until you see me. I got to be in the loop. It comes to me. John, as you pointed out earlier, he is not in the chain of command. How on earth does a military leader in this country have the audacity, have the gall to disregard then the president of the United States, who happened to be Donald Trump, to disregard the duly elected civilian authority of this country and arrogantly go before the United States Congress and say, yeah, this is what I did, but here's my justification. Under the Constitution of the United States, John, and I'll toss it to you, do you see anything in there that even gives a little bit of room like this for a military officer to take control of our government and to make decisions to either launch a military strike or not?
Steve, that's a simple answer. The answer is obviously no. And if that is all true, then that's a military coup. That's a coup. That's it. I mean, there's no other definition for that. And where are the other generals? Where are the other generals speaking to power? Or maybe they're laughing at him behind the scenes. I don't know. But I want to go back to that previous point I was making. If the Chinese knows he's out of the chain of command, and I'm assuming that they do, that's a pretty good guess on our part, okay? And they see a guy out of the chain of command offering up that kind of olive branch, that may lead them to believe there is a coup going on in America. And what does that mean? That means their defenses are going to rise. I mean, if anything, he hurt his own credibility with our adversaries, knowing they know that he's not in the chain of command. This guy, apparently he's spoken to every media source that there's a bunch of other books coming out, and then he claims in the testimony he hasn't had time to read books. Listen, Steve, this guy's dangerous, and he needs to get out of there. And if the Republicans take control, there needs to be a full-blown investigation into whether or not there was an attempted military coup in the United States of America led by this guy in particular.
Folks, we were lied to. We were misinformed. I expressed my views throughout the press around this country, the media outlets around this country, that General Mark Milley was parroting the policy of Joe Biden, which was to leave American troops exposed. 13 were killed, to leave Americans behind. They did everything they could not to save lives, but to save their own political agenda. And I'm going to stick with that story until such time somebody could prove me different. And based on the testimony that we've seen this past week, they really stumbled over everything. They couldn't even answer the questions, which leads me to this, John. Lieutenant Colonel Schuller, United States Marine combat veteran. He spoke out. He spoke up. He stood up. He spoke out about what was going on in Afghanistan and the disastrous exit. Now, look, I said earlier, folks, I'm very familiar with the Uniform Code of Military Justice. I'm a retired military officer. I believe Colonel Schuller could have done this differently. I believe, and he did state, I saw one of his videos where he did state if he had to do it over again, in the manner he did it, he would probably do it differently. That's fine. I get it. But John, to put him in jail, that is what is disturbing, folks. I say you want to court-martial him, you want to demote him, let him have due process. But two things disturb me, John, and then I'll toss it to you. One, they send the guy to a psychiatric evaluation. Two, they put him in jail. Now, folks, I want you to think of it. Let this sink in a minute. Where does this happen? Where did this happen? It happened in Nazi Germany. It happened in the Soviet Union, folks. You speak out, you're going to be sent to a psychiatrist to be declared insane, and you're going to be sent to a gulag camp. It's happening now in communist China. And you know where else it's happening now, John? In the United States of America. The United States Marine Corps, the United States Army, Navy, Air Force, all of our military branches. We're very, very proud of the fighting men and women on the ground risking their lives. But these leaders, John, these so-called military leaders, colleagues of mine, they're an embarrassment. They're a disgrace. They're cowards. They have tarnished the reputation of the United States military. Because, John, you just touched on it a little bit before by asking a question. Where are they? They need to stand up and speak out without violating the UCMJ. They could do that. But, John, does the guy deserve jail?
Well, just because they can jail him, Steve, is the question that you're raising, is the moral precept of should they be putting him in jail? Just the optics alone from the traditional views of America, liberty, freedom, independence, and so forth, it's horrible. But it is consistent with the communist and socialist mentality. You jail speech. People who speak out, you put them in jail. And as I said, just because they can, the bigger question to me, if I was in the chain of command, I'd be asking myself, should we be doing that? As you point out, he's going to be court-martialed. He acknowledged that he was going to lose rank. And in that regard, I'm not going to be critical of his decision, even in hindsight. I mean, the man is a patriot. He put his rank on the table. He's got more courage than any of the three that testified before Congress the other day. And to have a political prisoner in America with this military leader is probably more embarrassing to the American cause than anything I've ever seen. Keep in mind, there are other political prisoners right now in jail, Steve. We have people in jail in Washington, D.C. on misdemeanor trespassing charges. And slowly but surely, the whole idea of a conspiracy is being blown up by their own people. They're not going to be able to prove. I'm going to make a prediction. They're not going to be able to prove conspiracy in the legal sense in these cases. These people committed jaywalking tickets, trespassing, and they're in jail. They're in jail. I mean, again, political prisoners in America. I mean, it appears that Havana has arrived in Washington.
John, during the hearings when President Trump was in office, weren't there a couple of generals who testified against him publicly and criticized him? And why doesn't the same apply to them? All right. Then what they're saying is, well, if Lieutenant Colonel Schiller spoke up and is in jail, these generals, if I recall, they were still on active duty, right? They were wearing their uniforms, John.
Vindman, here's the guy who claims he heard Donald Trump make statements to a foreign leader that they impeached him for. Okay, and when the whole record was put into place, it was a sham. And Vindman was praised by the left as a hero for standing up to what he believed was a rogue president. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Joe Biden made a commitment on national television. Okay, excuse me, that ABC news feed goes globally, that he would not leave Americans behind. He made that commitment. No one forced him. Okay, Stephanopoulos didn't say, "Are you sure that's what you mean?" He gave him the opportunity to answer the question completely. He made that commitment. No one else, and he's the one who abandoned that commitment, and that is disgraceful.
John, I have a question for you, and it's a question because I don't have an answer to. Maybe you have it. I haven't heard a great push on the part of the Republicans, whether it be in the Senate or Congress, on behalf of and defending Lieutenant Colonel Schiller. I haven't heard any uprising over that. It's just astonishing. Now, I could be wrong. That's why I'm asking you. Have you heard anything? Any one of our elected officials who believe in the Constitution, who believe in individual rights, who believe in all the things we say we cherish, has anybody stood up and addressed this?
Steve, I believe 2 congressmen in the House hearings 2 days ago mentioned his name, but they didn't challenge the secretary or the chairman of the Joint Chiefs as to why he was in jail. It's probably, if I was an advisor to one of the congressmen in that setting, I don't think I would have asked about it. But what I would do if I was a representative is I would be writing a letter and demanding full disclosure as to what's going on in this case. They have a right to do that. I don't know if it would have served his purposes for Congress people to proselytize and politicize his issue in a public forum where the real issue really was the competency of the Afghan withdrawal.
Well, John, I'm not suggesting that they would bring it up at the hearing. I'm suggesting that they would do what you and I are doing. All right, get on the media. Start talking about this publicly. And you're absolutely right. That wouldn't be the setting to do it in. But I'm kind of befuddled over the fact that none of these guys. Where's Jim Jordan been? I haven't heard from him. Have you? Where's Cruz? I mean, look at I know they're addressing a lot of issues, but we got a military officer in jail. All right, for speaking up. That I get it. The UCMJ, different set of laws. Then why isn't Milley in jail? All right, why isn't he being charged? Why isn't he being brought up for court-martial? That's the part I don't get. Even if they can't do it, all right, but they could raise the issue before the public arena.
Yeah. Oh, well, listen, absolutely bring it and talk about it. But we don't know enough information yet, Steve. We don't know the employment history. We don't know. There's a lot if I would be very cautious. I mean, what we know so far is despicable. But you have to be cautious in these things. You don't know the whole story here. We know publicly what's going on, but we don't know what this man's military record is in total. We don't know what we're going to learn. And so you got to let those facts play out. And as a matter of policy, I'll just add this in terms of the politics of it. Think about this for a second. If you are defending this nation and you are having trouble with your command staff, what's the proper thing to do? You resign, right? You step out. He didn't do that in this case. He didn't do that. He could have stepped out like the commander from Space Force. Commander from Space Force was removed from duty. He stepped out and then criticized. Okay, and so that little fact, candidly, as a lawyer, concerns me that he didn't do it that way. Now we may learn more that favors what you suggest, speaking out publicly. And if that's the case, then they should scream from the highest mountain. But the fact of the matter is, the idea of putting him in jail just for his speech is where I have a problem.
Well, John, to your point, as a retired military officer, I agree with you. We should never, in the military ranks, publicly criticize our command staff. And I'll tell you why, folks. Our enemies are watching. You could really disrupt. You could do a lot of disruption in the military order of battle if you're a commander and you're criticizing your bosses. I'm with you 100% on that, John. But my point, as is your point, the guy shouldn't be in jail. Put the gag order on him like they did. Wait until, and I love what you said, John, do a full background check, find out what's really going on here, and then give him due process. But to put him in jail, I have a problem with that too. Yeah,
it's really troubling that they would do that. I don't know if he poses a security risk to the national.
And Milley doesn't.
Well, right? Milley's existence in his job is a security risk. That's just my opinion. That's just a humble layman's opinion.
Yeah.
I see what I've seen. I watched Americans, and Americans are still trapped there. We're talking about it as if this situation has been resolved, and it hasn't. And the Taliban is going through house to house looking for former military staff that helped Americans and ruining people's lives. I mean, this is the same Taliban that Jen Psaki, the president's mouthpiece, said behaves in a businesslike manner. I mean, come on.
Oh, John, I'm glad you mentioned that. The Taliban behaves in a businesslike manner. Every day somebody's being beheaded. Every day there's a video being posted of somebody being tortured and killed. These are the businessmen that General Milley, Secretary Austin, Secretary Blinken, and Joe Biden are sitting across the table from, trying to get some sort of an agreement on how they should behave. Folks, we're in trouble. we're in serious trouble. But we, the people, and I've said this time and time again, we cannot surrender our rights, our individual rights. We cannot surrender our ability to speak up and speak out and stand up for this country, especially to stand up for the Constitution. Never in the history, from what I recall, John, from what I'm being told, has anyone launched a petition demanding the removal of a military officer, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in this country. I think we're the first, folks. So I'm asking you folks to please look for our petition link. If you have it, you don't have it, you can't find it. Campaignforamerica.com is our website. Go to our contact page. Just send us your email. We'll get the link to you. We've just reached 2,000 signatures, over 2,000 within the past hour. We reached over that threshold. We're looking for 10,000. Then we're going to get it to the press and members of Congress. I think, John, that is significant. People will contact us. What do I do? I'm helpless. I can't do anything. We found a pathway where everybody could participate in voicing. You're making history, folks. When you're part of this process, you are part of history. And I believe, John, that there'll be enough public pressure of being brought upon us against the elected officials, whether they're Democrat or Republican, to take action against this guy. I don't think they'll have a choice. I think when the public starts to show that they have lost confidence in the military leadership of this country, action's going to be taken by someone.
Steve, just keep the petition going, send it out there, and get as many signatures in. Don't stop until we get enough.
All right, John, you and I had a little discussion, very brief, before we went on the air. People are asking the question, what's with Durham?
Well, he issued some more subpoenas today. And this was very interesting. If you don't know, Steve, and for the audience, Michael Sussman, who was an attorney with the firm Perkins and Coie, was hired by the Clinton campaign and also hired by the DNC to represent them. And they are the same firm that hired Christopher Steele, who the author of the famous Steele dossier. Well, Mr. Sussman is being charged with lying to investigators because he brought forward what he claimed to be information connecting Donald Trump's business dealings with a Alfie Bank in Russia. And he presented that information to the FBI. He failed to mention to the FBI that he was an employee of the Clinton campaign. And we know what happened from there. The Steele dossier went viral internally, and it was used as the very mechanism to prosecute some of the Trump campaign volunteers. So he's under indictment. Now, we've learned today that Durham has subpoenaed the records from the law firm. And even though Sussman is no longer a partner there, those records are now being subpoenaed. And I would anticipate a heavy legal fight as it relates to quote unquote attorney-client privilege. But you know what pierces attorney-client privilege, Steve? Criminal activity. Okay. And the broader question, and if I was this big, powerful firm, Perkins and Coie's partners, I'd be wondering if I was going to be considered a conspirator by Durham. That, you know, by all accounts, Mr. Durham is an independent guy. He didn't bring out any results prior to the election. I don't believe he saw it as his duty to save an election for a president that we replace every 4 years. I believe he believes his duty is to get to the truth. And he's doing it piece by piece, and I'm sure he's meeting all the obstacles. Perkins and Coie is one of the most powerful law firms, not in the United States, but in the world, Steve. Their tentacles are everywhere. They got ties to the military as well, interestingly enough, to the deep state. So Durham is doing it right. I want to see if he gets those records under the subpoena, and it's going to be fascinating to see what those records entail.
So that investigation continues. It hasn't died. All right, folks, we're going to try to limit our broadcast to 30 minutes, and we've got another couple of minutes because we're finding that people, after 30 minutes or so, John, a broadcast like ours, I know they've got things to do at 7 p.m., so we're going to try to pack in a lot within a 30-minute period. So the Durham investigation continues, so don't lose heart over that, folks. And getting back to Millie Austin and Blinken, think about this, folks, and Biden. They lied to us. Remember, John, these guys and others talking about the big lie, right? The big lie. President Trump, the big lie. The Republicans, the big liars, all right? And on and on and on. Well, there is a big lie, folks. And the big lie is these people, Biden, Milley, Austin, Blinken. They lied to us, I know as a fact, on 2 occasions. And I'm sure there were many more lies. But the 2, John, are when they were, in my view, when they were before that Senate hearing, that congressional committee hearing, they lied about the who, what, when, and where. They recommended or didn't recommend that 2,500 troops be left in Afghanistan at Kabul, in Kabul, to protect our troops and to protect the civilians. They would not admit, they would not commit, if you will, to saying whether they did or not tell Joe Biden. Joe Biden says one thing, as you brought out to Stephanopoulos, and these guys are saying another thing. So they lied there. But they also lied somewhere else, folks. And this is what's really troubling about when we talk about transparency in government, when we talk about trusting your government leaders. John, the drone strike, they killed civilians. They killed a family, folks. And there's 2 reasons why that troubles me. One, remember, I work for U.S. Naval Intelligence. I work for our intelligence community. We got the best intelligence resources on the planet, folks. We know where people are. We know who's in vehicles. We know where convoys are. Can mistakes be made? Yes, they can. But in this case, folks, a terrible mistake was made. They killed a family, an innocent family, a man or a woman and their children, all right, with a drone strike. And what bothers me, John, is it could have very well been a mistake. Like I said, the fog of war, things happen. But to come before the American people and to tell us that they killed one of the top terrorist leaders in that area, knowing what they did, is very, very troubling, John.
Well, you're suggesting that they knew the difference at the time of the strike between a water can and flammable material. It's interesting. Interesting question you pose. I don't know if they knew, but here's what we do know. They didn't correct the record right away. In fact, it wasn't until it was reported by the New York Times, of all people, that they had to even address the issue. Otherwise, this would have been swept under the rug. I mean, so let's assume that you're right and they knew from the very beginning. That's a bold-faced lie. But let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they learned a couple of days later, maybe a few hours later. But they didn't say anything about it. They didn't say anything publicly. This poor family, okay, was apparently they were, by report, they were going to a family gathering of other people. 13 members of the family were killed. What has the American response been to that family? I mean, I think there's a legal obligation, a moral obligation to that family to help them any way we can. But of course, we have no one there right now that can be of help to that family. Do we? We have no one there that can help that family. We couldn't even give that family money because what would probably happen is the Taliban would take the money we would give them. So it's a mess. It's a self-inflicted mess. It's arrogance of leadership. I did not see any humble pie in that testimony by those 3 individuals the other day. You would think, given all the set of facts, they would have been humbled. They were not. They dug in, and I'll tell you, Steve, that's my biggest concern for America. You pointed it out. Our enemies are watching. Heck, I'm nobody, and I'm just watching it, and my mouth is dropping. I just cannot believe the stuff that comes out of their mouth, and they do not leave me feeling at all confidence at all. I have no confidence in them whatsoever.
Folks, keep an eye on China. There's a lot going on. Believe me, you're going to be hearing about a lot down the road here. The Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese military are building their forces. I just shudder to think what they're going to try to do. I understand, John, that it was within the past 48 hours, and I'm going to get this confirmed, but I did get it from a reliable source, that a Chinese Communist Party Air Force general apparently made a statement to the United States: "We will see you in the skies. We will see you in the skies." Now, if he said that, and again, folks, it's something that has to be confirmed, but if he said something to that effect, that, John, is a chilling message to the United States. We know that they are sending their fighter jets over Taiwan airspace. We know that their carrier task group and their ships are in the vicinity, if you will, of Taiwan. We know that the Rocket Man in North Korea, John, not on one occasion, but now on two or three, launched missiles, folks, not too far off the Japanese coast. So they're testing our resolve, folks. They are testing our resolve. So, John, the question is this. Do you think that this administration would, in view of the facts that we just saw with regard to our own people left behind in Afghanistan, do you think if the Chinese make a move on Taiwan, that the United States of America are going to come to the defense of that free nation?
We have to. And my concern, I'm concerned about where this is heading. You know, there's a reason why Joe Biden risked upsetting the French in the transatlantic alliance by selling those submarines to Australia. There's a reason behind that. He didn't. I'm sure if given the choices, he would not want to upset the French president and send relations in Europe into a tizzy. In fact, the Europeans believe, it's been reported in some of the European press that I've read, they believe America is becoming very Pacific Central. Now, that tells me that we're gearing up for something. We also saw the House of Representatives pass expanding the draft, or not yet a draft, but the selective service registration to all women as well. These are subtle moves that you pick up and you say, what's going on here? So as it relates to Taiwan directly, we more or less don't have a choice. But, you know, if you're the Chinese, you have it pretty easy. You may be able to get what you want without having to fire a shot. If I was the Chinese, I would put the Taiwanese leadership into mental anguish by simply just pointing to what just happened in Afghanistan and ask them this question. Do you want to put your lot in with us peacefully, or do you want to do it by force and have the Americans abandon you the way they abandoned the Afghans? I mean, that would be putting the Taiwanese leadership in a very in a tough position. And they would have to think about that after what they just witnessed.
John, you'd make a good intelligence officer. I'll tell you why. You just connected some dots. Now, folks, just hear us out a little. We're going to go over a little because this is so important. It's going to affect your lives and the lives of your children. Remember, months we've been saying, I've been saying, Joe Biden is going to drag us into a very, very bad war. And it's not going to be with terrorists. I believe the very bad war is going to be with China. I really believe that. And I base that only on what I'm seeing. But John just said it. He framed it perfectly. He connected some dots. You said, John, it seems like we're gearing up for something. Indeed, we are, folks. Our Pacific fleets, we're gearing up with the United States Naval Combatant Forces in the Pacific. We're gearing up with regard to just a little bit, John, like you said. All of a sudden, we're talking about selective service and the draft. We're gearing up, folks, for what may turn out to be a horrible, terrible military confrontation with who? I don't know. My opinion, it would be China. So think about this. We're weakened. We're weak. We really are, folks. Joe Biden has weakened the resolve of our country. He's weakened our military. He's weakened us domestically. He's just utterly, utterly weakened us. But what he hasn't done, John, I believe, is weakened the will of the American people, which includes you and me and the millions of Americans across this country. He hasn't weakened our resolve or our will. So what can we do to at least address a lot of these issues? And John, I'd say number one, and you and I have talked about this, and let's get right down to something really dead serious, folks. Do not buy into any scenario or narrative that you should not go out and vote. Do not buy into that. Don't buy into the fact that, well, it's rigged anyway, why vote? This is exactly what the enemies of this country want us to believe. Folks, go vote. If you got to mail the ballot in, mail it in. Don't buy. Listen, we can do nothing. If they're rigging the election, we can't do anything about it. Right, John? Well, I mean, we're just not in a position to do anything about it. But we should not surrender, folks. We should not surrender our individual rights and ability to vote and get our people in office. So we're talking about an election coming up November 2nd here in New Jersey and many across the country, gubernatorial races, state legislators, on and on and on. John, I believe this is the key up for the congressional races in 2022. Now, John, you've been around a long time. You've been in politics. My guess is we can strike. When I say we, the people of the United States who believe in the Constitution and believe in the rule of law, and order and believe in this country, we could strike a decisive blow against the Democrats, socialists, and communists. We get to the polls or we mail in our votes and flip every single state red.
Well, Steve, from our lips to God's ears, unfortunately, gerrymandering and other things that we've done in our political system will prohibit that from happening. But let me just add this. You know, we have COVID. We know that China, whether it was accidentally leaked in a lab or let's say it's true, it came from the bat caves or the wet market that they claim. Here's what China did. They allowed the people of Wuhan to travel the world, but they weren't allowed to let the people of Wuhan travel within China. That was a deliberate act. That's not ambiguity. That's a deliberate act, no matter what the origin is. The origin is a smokescreen. They made a deliberate decision to tell people of the Wuhan province, you cannot travel within China. But hey, you want to go to Europe? You want to go to America? You want to go wherever you want. That, you know, so we also have, you mentioned before, Steve, about China's belligerent threats. This is the second time. Just a few weeks ago, they threatened to bash the heads in of Americans. This is very belligerent behavior, and it's state sponsored. These are not people in China speaking on their own. This is coming directly from the Chinese Communist government. So, Steve, that you can argue credibly, persuasively, maybe, that this is part of what's been going on in the last 2 years. You can argue persuasively that they put in weakened American leadership. But you bring out a very good point, because the Japanese made the same mistake at the beginning of World War II. They assessed that America was weak, we were soft and fat and lazy. They were talking about the American leadership, but the American people are a lot stronger than that. And that's where I put my faith in. I put our faith in not in government leaders and titles and so forth. I put my faith in the voters. And now voters and people like us and myself. I mean, I'm the son of a father who's a plumber and a truck driver. How did I get involved in politics? In America, you could participate. They're trying to break our will, people. In my opinion, they're trying to break our will. Don't let that happen. Show them that we are strong and we believe in individuality. We believe in freedom, and we believe in the rights afforded to us through God as passed through the Constitution of America. Steve's right. Go out and vote. Don't stop voting. People in New Jersey, you have a big governor's election coming up. Go out and vote. The numbers don't favor a Republican victory, but send a message. Send a message. Maybe miracle happens and we do win, but you don't know until you vote. Don't stop voting. Once you stop voting, you have self-censored freedom in America.
All right, folks, as we wrap things up, one more thing before we do wrap up tonight's broadcast. The New York Times, John, I don't know if you know this, but I tweeted about this earlier, apparently suggested that the American flag, Old Glory, the design be changed. And they actually had printed impressions on some of the ideas that they had about changing this flag, our flag. This is arrogant. This is socialism and communism. So here's what I did, folks. I actually sent, I'm putting a letter together to New York Times, and I'm sending them a gift. And I tweeted out that to leave Old Glory alone, to leave our stars and stripes alone. And I'm sending them a gift. And here's the gift I'm sending them that they could fly, folks, over their building in New York, right here. This is the flag that the New York Times should fly, folks. This is the flag that they should fly right here. Remember that one, John? Remember that flag there? Okay.
Steve, the New York Times sided with Hitler in Germany in World War II and said there were never any concentration camps. I mean, really, they're essentially a joke. Okay? They're a joke. I mean, let them have their funny games. The bottom line is, I would also send them the Russian flag. Send them both. Send them the Cuban flag. Send them the Venezuelan flag.
Chinese flag.
Chinese flag is what's in play right now for sure.
All right, folks. So that's it. So a couple of program notes. We will be on Monday night at 6:30. The reason why is we're doing some traveling. I said part of our mission is to travel across the country and to advance our America First agenda, to advance the foundation in which this country was founded upon. We're not giving up. We're not giving up. We're encouraging people in these critical next 4 weeks to vote in November, and don't buy into the fact. And I'm seeing some of the feed. Well, if the Dominion machines are being used, why vote? If they're fixed, folks, don't buy into that. Listen, we've got a lot of information that the American people, I'm sure, haven't been told. And down the line, we expect to discuss some of this information on the air. You all know we deal with facts. And so we're not going to give opinions based on rhetoric. We're going to give our conclusions based on facts. So remember that. But I'm asking all of you who are listening, there's so much garbage being thrown at us from both sides, even our side. You got people buying into some crazy stuff. And listen, I've gotten into some intense discussions with people on our side, meaning our side, Republicans, saying, hey, look, let me explain something to you. When I hear the word rhino, I get it. John, I know you get it. There are Republicans elected to office that are not really representing our best interests, but there are also Republicans running for office that are like us, that are moderate. There are Republicans running for office that are not fully as conservative, if you will, as we would like them to. But I don't call those people rhinos, because if we were going to call people who are thinking for themselves and saying, well, I agree with this and not with that, Abraham Lincoln would be called a rhino. Ronald Reagan would be called a rhino. John, my point is, as we begin to close down, is we got to stop the name calling within our own ranks. We have to stop. Look at, folks, the Democrats, they're sitting back and they're watching closely how we are self-destructing as Republicans. I say, if there are establishment Republicans that we disagree with, good. Get rid of them. Let's put people in office that we agree with. But John, I loved Ronald Reagan's 11th commandment. It was a great commandment. Thou shalt not speak ill of any other Republican, because the Democrats will use every bit of what we say against Republicans when their candidate runs for office. So John, to just finish up on that point, I think it behooves us to share with people of our own party, think before you act, do your research. Don't take us as gospel. Do some research. If you feel something that we said needs to be corrected, you let us know and we'll correct it. But when it comes to this election, please don't worry about the voting machines. Don't worry about the mail-in ballots. Do what you've always done. Vote. If we find out something happened later on, that's one thing. My guess is, folks, that we have an opportunity now to turn this country around beginning in 4 weeks, the state legislature and gubernatorial races. But if we're going to sit back and we're going to say, well, I'm not voting for any Republican because of this or that, you just gave the Chinese Communist Party and the socialists in this country exactly what they want. John?
I want to respond to one of the messages, Betty Morgan, who asks a very appropriate question. She says, so what do we call Liz Cheney, Mitt Romney?
I just saw that. I'm glad you're answering it.
And I got to, Betty, I'm going to say this to you. They registered as Republicans. They're Republicans. I have two daughters. I'm lucky. I got two gems. I know people that have 2 or 3 kids, and two of them are bad and 2 of them are good. You get what you get, and you don't get upset. Name calling, I just think has no place in our culture. And because it's one of the hallmarks and one of the strategies that the left employs. They label with name calling. How about the word anti-vaxxer? That's a name calling. Calling people names is really devoid of any intellectual capacity to deal in debate. And so I don't think we should name call. I don't think anyone should name call. It hurts us as people. You don't raise your kids and you don't teach them to go and call people names, do you? Okay, so maybe we should practice a little bit of that on our side. I don't care what the other side does, because when they call me names I point out to them. And I did that in a debate very recently, Steve, in a public forum. I was called in. I said, excuse me, you're calling me a name? How old are you, 10, 11, 16, 15? I mean, what's your age to sit there? How old can you be to be calling someone a name? And I have to tell you, that shuts down, that's an effective strategy. Technique that shuts down the debate faster than you could say Joe Biden is senile.
Yeah. Yeah, John, you're right. But Betty, that's a great question. And we encourage people like Betty to address these issues. All right, folks. So that's it. So a few things. One, I always say pray. Pray to God. There's a God above who has, I believe, the shadow of his wings over this nation. Let us not forget that. The atheist, communist, socialists would want us to forget that. They're accountable to no one, but we are accountable to God. That's number one. Put our faith to work. Go vote. Please spread the word. Please share this video. It's very, very important you do that. And a lot of people from around the world are responding to us because you're sharing the video. Go to our website. That's campaignforamerica.com. If you've already signed the petition, I think there's a guy named Ricky here who asked the question, is this the same petition that's been up there a while? Yes, it is. It's not a different petition. But please get the word out. Sign that. We believe General Milley should be removed from that office as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And then, folks, we simply ask for you to do your duty as an American citizen and vote. And that's it. Okay, John, any last words?
God bless America.
Amen. Folks, we'll see you Monday night, 6:30 p.m. And until then, I want to thank you for joining us. God bless you. God bless America. And what is the chief end of man? To John's point about name calling and all the other things we shouldn't be doing, is to love, to please, and to glorify God forever. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless America.